In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Grizzlies beat writer Drew Hill, joined as always by columnist Chris Herrington. We are on the eve of the regular season, Chris. It is Monday. I will be flying to Utah tomorrow, and the Grizzlies will be getting the regular season started on Wednesday night against the Utah Jazz. It's been a long wait. It's been a very long wait for this moment, but it is here. Feels like Grizzlies fans have been searching for meaningful basketball since January, so it's going to be a good time. We did get a little bit of news today. I want to start here. For that season opener, sounds like we are going to get no Jaren Jackson Jr. We'll get into the last preseason game and thoughts on some more things coming up. But Chris, just your initial thoughts on Jaren missing the season opener in Utah.
It's disappointing, clearly. You were there, I was not. It seemed like Taylor Jenkins suggested he would make his debut on the home opener on Saturday because games 2, games 3 are back-to-back. And I think even if he had come back for game 1 Wednesday, he probably was not going to play both halves of the back-to-back, coming off the hamstring. So I would just assume him play the second at home than the first. It's definitely disappointing, from fans who are wanting to see, as it looked like we were going to see the full starting lineup actually take the floor in game 1. I think, Grizzlies fans are understandably skittish about injury stuff, and they are going to start, the season with 4 of the presumed 10 rotation players if they were fully healthy. 4 of those guys are not going to be available, with Luke Kennard, Vince Williams Jr., and
G.G. Jackson. Yeah.
Right. And so, that's disappointing. I think you look around the league, Grizzlies injury issues are not at the forefront of league injury news right now, and for good reason. There are a lot of teams out there having worse injury issues than the Grizzlies at the moment. But it's certainly disappointing to be starting the season without Jaren. And I don't know whether, caution is kind of a buzzword for the Grizzlies. We're being cautious. We're always being cautious. And that might be really good. They may be being properly cautious. I think there are fans out there who wonder if they're overly cautious, and I can't tell you the answer to that. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not. I'm not assessing these players. I only know what we hear, but it's definitely frustrating. And you would just hope that whatever is going on with Jaren, that it's not the kind of thing that's going to linger. That once he takes the floor, he's going to be good to go.
Yeah, I think that's fair to ask. Are they being overly cautious? Sure. I mean, we saw at practice Jaren playing 4-on-4 the other day, so it did look like, he's moving pretty well. They noted that part of the reason that they're being so cautious is a conditioning aspect to this. Like Jaren hasn't really been running. And the one thing I would say, like these soft tissue injuries, a lot of them happen right when players are getting back into the swing of playing basketball all the time again after the off season. It's not just the Grizzlies that are dealing with this. Like there's other teams in the league dealing with similar types of injuries.
Right.
And those can be tricky. And I think the last thing you want is for Jaren to go full speed again without really going full speed first in a game. And then this is longer. So while it is cautious, yes, it makes sense to me. I'll say
no,
that.
You're right. It is exactly the kind of injury in which you want to be more cautious because you could just play hurt. He could be playing hurt and just play through it and not be 100%. And so you do want to get it behind him pretty much and not risk that. I think that's accurate. I do think I was doing a little bit of research today, fiddling with trying to do, and I know this doesn't sound big picture because I'm getting into some stats here, but I'm going to try to be more big picture, sort of setting the table for the season. One of the things I was looking at was the frequency with which the Grizzlies get their best players on the floor. Because I was asked, I did Nate Duncan's podcast last week previewing the Grizzlies, and one of the things he asked me was, Do you think that just having John Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson all together makes you a 50-win team? And my answer was yes, it does. But the problem there is that over the last 3 seasons, and I say three because Desmond Bane joined the starting lineup 3 seasons ago. So in the 3 seasons since Desmond Bane's joined the starting lineup, the average number of games per season that they've had Ja, Des, and Jaren all on the floor is 30. Obviously, you only got 9 last season with Ja, but the numbers aren't that big the other 2 seasons either. And over 5 seasons since the league, the average games per season that just Ja and Jaren have played together is 35. I think the key to this Grizzlies season is that both those numbers have to be a lot bigger this season.
Yeah, that's not good enough. That's not good enough.
Nope.
Simply not. Yeah, it's really disappointing. I think it's interesting too because like Marcus Smart talked today at practice, and he was basically saying it's go time. Like we're relatively healthy. We're pretty healthy.
Right.
And it's like it feels like you're healthy, but you're missing a lot of pieces.
You're healthy.
Yeah.
Marcus and Ja's health. I mean, that is the most important thing. Is that Ja? Look, you were at the game on Friday night. I was not.
Yes.
I watched it on my laptop at a hotel room in Chicago. But Ja looked great.
He did, and I do want to get to that. But you said that's the most important thing. I don't know. We've been saying this on this podcast. Like Jaren's gonna have to play a lot of minutes. That Jaren they cannot replicate. They can't replicate Ja, but they have good backcourt pieces without Ja.
Right.
This one's tough. Like that one is really tough to replicate. And now you're asking Edey to do more, and he's a rookie going to play in his first real NBA game.
It'll be interesting to see how they navigate the rotation in the first 2 games of the season without Jaren. I mean, I assume your assumption, because this is what they've been doing, that Santi Aldama will start. Santi Aldama and Zach Edey will start in the front court. That seems likely. Santi's had a good preseason. Brandon Clark has been up and down. He's looked really great at times in the preseason, and he's like missed a game with knee soreness and another game or two where he didn't look so hot. They could either go Jake DeLaravia playing mostly power forward, or Jay Huff could play. Could be some of both.
I'd like to see some of both.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see how they navigate all that. I think you're going to see maybe some Zach Edey with 4 non-bigs around him. Maybe that includes Jake LaRavia as a quote unquote power forward. But I think they've liked the smalls around Zach. So maybe just see sort of how they navigate the minutes without Jaren for a couple games. That'll be interesting, but it's not an interesting you welcome. Like you don't want to find that out. You'd rather have Jaren out there.
No, and you don't want to be losing games to Utah, especially not this early in the season. So
the other news of the day we should just mention before we maybe get into the other stuff and get into the game and the news of the weekend, you with Yuki, but today was a sort of a contract extension day. I'm not sure if the deadline is passed as we speak.
I don't think that's going to happen.
The Santi thing is not going to. I was almost certain that wasn't going to happen 2 weeks ago when I wrote about it. I don't know if the deadline's officially passed, but that's not going to happen, and it makes sense. The other thing, this was reported, but to me, it's like it was 99.9% known anyway. But Bobby Marks reported that Grizzlies and Jaren Jackson will not do an extension this summer. They're going to wait till at least next summer. I mean, I wrote about that a week ago. That was never going to happen. But the Santi thing, they will take him into, his 4th season, still in the rookie contract without an extension. They have never taken someone too restricted for agency. Since Zach Lyman's been here, they've never taken someone too restricted for agency. I think there's a decent chance Santi will be the first. I think he's in an interesting spot where I think they like Santi, but given the investment they have other places on the roster, they're not, necessarily willing to pay him what he was willing to take. Obviously, you look around the league last 2 days. Moses Moody, who's been like the 11th man in Golden State, got a deal that's like $13 million a year. Corey Kispert, who's sort of a middle rotation guy for Washington, got a deal that's in that 13 to 14 range. I suspect that maybe Santi's agent, you look at those deals, you think, well, that's sort of where we are. And I don't think the Grizzlies would be willing to make that investment right now. So it's no surprise to me that nothing's going to happen there.
Yeah, that gives the Grizzlies a little bit more flexibility, right, if they don't sign him at this stage. And I mean, it's certainly possible Santi could come out and have a great season and earn a lot more money for himself. But that's just a risk that this team's going to have to take at this stage if this is the way that they're going to play it. So, Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with Santi, but I do think you're right. He's played pretty well in the preseason, so things are trending upward there. He hit some big threes in the preseason game, the last preseason game we saw. We should talk about that a little bit. I wrote about Ja being back because I felt
Yep.
like that was kind of the story of the night. Ja playing in front of the home fans again. He seemed really happy to be back on the court at FedEx Forum. It had been 290 days since he had played in an NBA game at FedEx Forum. So a really long time. And it basically was the job performance that I think everybody had hoped for. You got the alley oop dunk, you got the alley oop pass, you got the fancy dribble moves with the behind the back pass to Desmond Bain. You got a little bit of the Ja Morant experience, and that's what I think everybody wanted to see, and what was so encouraging for the Grizzlies. And it was good to see Ja happy afterwards. I asked him if there was a singular moment that he could pinpoint where he was like, "Oh man, this feels really good again. Like I'm back." And he just pointed to the very first play of the game when he
Right.
drew in two defenders and fired a pass to Zach Edey. And that was definitely a fun moment. I like that those two not only appear to have actual chemistry or be they're building towards having actual chemistry. I also like the fact that they're being intentional about it because they're going
Right.
to be on the court together a lot. Did you have any other takeaways from that preseason game?
Yeah, I mean, with the Ja eating thing, I wrote just a few paragraphs about Ja and my preseason takeaways thing yesterday. The Ja Edey thing, we haven't seen a lot of it. They only played 2 games in the preseason together. But that last game, you got just a little bit of taste, sort of the different ways it could work. And the first play of the game for the Grizzlies, I think, certainly the first bucket, I think, was the play you mentioned, the high pick and roll where Edey slips the pick, Ja finds for the pass, 2-hand dunk. And I think Ja's last basket of the game was another Ja Edey high pick and roll. This one where Edey sets a pick that frees Ja up. He gets into the lane, hits a floater. That's basic meat and potatoes like basketball. But I think you're gonna see a lot of that. Like we've seen a lot of that in the past. We'll see a lot of that now of John Morant coming off a pick, getting into space and making a play. And that's something that you could repeat over and over again, and they can make things happen with that. And I think, hopefully a preview of coming attractions in terms of both of those kind of plays.
What do you make of just Ja's? I don't want to say mentality because it's not like we can fully get into the head of Ja Morant, but like just the energy that he's had. Because today he talked again at practice, and he said the goals are number one goal is to have fun. Number two goal is to stay healthy. And number three goal, everybody already knows. We all want to parade on Beale Street. That's what he said. That was the Ja Morant line, which I thought was good. Um, but I asked him like, how do we know when Ja's happy? He goes, when I've got a smile on my face, and he goes, I'm gonna be honest. I think you guys can even recognize it too. It's much better for all of us when I'm in a good mood. And I
Right,
was
right.
like, that is correct because he's a quote machine when the guy's happy. But I think it's been a productive and encouraging preseason for Ja.
I think the vibes are all good with him. He's looked great on the floor. I mean, it's sort of the thing where he came back from the 25 game suspension, and people wondered like, how's he gonna look? He looked just like Ja. First time he was Ja. This time he's coming off like a major injury, the shoulder thing, a long layoff, long rehab. Steps right on the court, looks like Ja. I you know I my biggest Ja concern is just like durability, right? It's like how often he's going to be on the floor. Little stuff like the turn ankle. But I got no doubts that when he's playing, he's going to be great this season. And I think the vibes are good. His spirit seems good. All that is important. And I guess there seems to be just a general once you've had something taken away from you for a little bit, there seems to be a little bit more of an appreciation to have it back. And I do get a little bit of that with Ja.
Is there a single player that you think the shooting could improve? I'll say this. Ja was asked about taking more pull-up threes because he took a couple in that game against Miami. And Ja seemed to think he's going to shoot more threes this year than he has in the past, simply because of the style of offense that they're going to run. Um, and Santi shot a lot of threes in the preseason, and he's looked good. Is there anything you've seen shooting wise that's encouraging or discouraging to this point?
I no, I was sort of wait and see on that. The reality is that Ja played 2 preseason games. He
Yep.
played 9 games last season. He didn't play last preseason. It's been a long time. And so I have a hard time. We watched him play, in training camp, shoot around. To me, that stuff doesn't mean
None of that
much.
really. Yeah.
Yeah. And so to me, whether or not he has improved as a shooter is something that will come from work, was the old quote in the dark, right? If he has grown as a shooter, I don't know that he has, but if he has, it's from work that's done out of eyesight. And it's been a long time since he's played a lot. And so we're going to have to wait. And shooting is not something you really pick up on after 1, 2, 3, 4 games. Like wait 20 games in and see what it looks like, because good shooters miss shots, bad shooters make shots. So we'll see with that. I do know that I don't know if he hit a three technically in the 2 preseason games, but he took one like foot on the line. He canned a long pull up two that I think he thought was a three, and it was just sort of barely over the line, right, in the Miami game. And that looks smooth, but he's made shots before. I just think we got to give that time. I think in terms of the team, the team context stuff, it'll be interesting to see if he's off the ball more. And if he's off the ball more, does that lead to more catch and shoot threes than he's taken in the past? I certainly think the team as a whole took a lot of threes in the preseason, and I think their goal is to take a lot of threes. So we'll just have to see how that carries over. I hope Ja improves as a 3-point shooter. I don't think taking threes is the highest and best use of Ja Morant necessarily. I like him better in the lane as a scorer and as a passer than I do as a shooter. But he would be more dangerous at the first two things if he becomes better at the third thing.
Last thing on Ja, real quick, and then we'll keep this moving. He did say after the game he feels like this is the most prepared that the team has been for the start of a season. I don't know what else he would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
less
how
prepared
often the
this year.
guys come out and say, "I just don't think we're ready." I mean, that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wasn't expecting a different answer. But I think that it was interesting to compare and contrast Ja's answer versus Marcus's answer to the same question. I forget who asked it, but someone was asking the question to just about everyone. And Ja basically said, I feel like we're more prepared, like we're taking everything a little bit more seriously this year than we did in the past. That criticism doesn't now happen after the game, it happens during the games, constructive criticism, which I did note that slightly.
No, that's interesting. That is interesting.
Marcus said, we got a ways to go to get comfortable with this offense still. So I'm not trying to get ahead of ourselves here, but I do think that we're, from a mental standpoint, pretty prepared. So answer's a little bit different. I think both are fair, but that was the only other interesting note I took out of Ja's post game on Friday against Miami. Okay, let's move on to some of the other news of the weekend, but first let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join Youth Villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
The big news of the weekend, Chris. I want to get into your 10 takeaways of the preseason, which we will talk about, but this was part of it. It was in the top 3. Yuki Kawamura, 2-way contract. How about that? I'll just say, this is wild. This has been wild. I like Yuki as much as the next guy. I've enjoyed watching him in the preseason. I think it's really fun to watch him play, obviously at his size. I still don't have a good grasp on just how popular this guy is. When I put that news out there over the weekend, I thought that it would be big, but I didn't imagine that this thing would have like 2.5 million engagements on. So it's crazy. And I was talking to somebody today, and they said, yeah, I think part of the reason why his popularity is so high is because he's not just super popular in Japan. Apparently, he's very popular in all of Asia, and so that is contributing to this, but it's fun. This is going to be fun. I don't know how productive of a player he's going to be as a 2-way player playing in the NBA, but it's going to be a joy when Yuki gets on the court in the final minutes of a blowout, and it's going to be good entertainment, I think, for everyone.
Is Yuki Kawamura the Grizzlies' Bronny James? Who Who
Might be a better player than Bronny
he
James.
might, he might be a better, but I don't know. Neither of them have demonstrated they're going to be meaningful NBA players. Let's put it that way. Also, Yuki's on a two-way, not on the main roster, so there's another difference for you.
Yeah.
But in the sense of the gap between popularity and impact in NBA games, like they're probably top two in the league right now in terms of the gap between those two things, maybe. I don't know. I'm sort of ambivalent about it. I believe basketball should be fun. This is an entertainment enterprise. And it not only does, but beyond, not only does Yuki Kawamura delight fans, he delights teammates, it seems. And maybe there's value in that. There's value in like having contribute to the mood on the practice court and to the vibe like around the team. You said, John Morant's like tweeting out about Yuki getting signed. He seems happy about it, right? And so like I think, he brings popularity, he brings attention, he brings good feelings among fans and teammates, and he'll probably be a pretty good point guard for the Memphis Hustle. And so all of those things have value, and all of those things collectively might have more than enough value to warrant a two-way contract. So I think it might be fine. I do think that it represents a change in attitude about the two-way from where the Grizzlies were a few months ago, when they seemed very intent on having two-way players who could operate as depth pieces for the main roster. That was very much the idea of Scottie Pippen. That was 100% the idea with Jay Huff. And even though he's a rookie, it's kind of the idea with Cam Spencer too. Cam Spencer's not the guy who like develops for 3 years in the G League. He either he can play or he can't. He's sort of like Conchar in that way. That is not really Yuki. I don't, not to rain on the parade, but I just don't think he's ever going to be an NBA player. He's just too small. And so whatever the rationale is for the signing, and I think it's part the vibes and part the functionality of their G League roster. It is not someone who is like going to be the next Scottie Pippen, Vince Williams Jr., Gigi Jackson 4-year main roster contract guy. They have tended to use these two ways either for depth for the main roster or to find players who will be long-term fits. It's not either of those. And maybe it's fine that it's not either of those, but it is notable that it's not either of those.
Yeah, it's fine. And look, it's not like signing two-way players is like hampering them significantly financially.
Right.
They could move on from Yuki at any point and say, "Hey,
Right.
we need somebody that's a functional NBA point guard in here because everyone got hurt again." Like that. That's possible. Look, it's just exciting. It's just fun to have fun players, right? That's the
Yeah.
bottom line here. And he's undoubtedly a fun player who, by the way, can actually play, is a pass first point guard and can pass and has shown that.
Yeah. It's not clear to me he can play at NBA regular season level, but maybe we'll find out. Maybe we won't. But he can
Right.
play at the G League level. Sure.
But this isn't a cash grab for the Grizz. You know what I mean? That's not
Right.
what this is. I don't think so. I think that this is, again, as you said, for G League functionality purposes, signing Yuki Kawamura to a two-way contract is probably a good idea because he's going to set up all kinds of guys in the G League. I think that can be of value.
When I say they've gone away from where they were with the two-way, they've gone back to where they were before in some ways, because the Yuki Kawamura signing, it's not, from a basketball standpoint, is not that different from the Jacob Gilliard signing a year ago.
No.
A similar kind of player, similar kind of idea. Gilliard was not meant to play as much for the Grizzlies as he did. That was a product of the injury stuff. He was meant to be a good point guard for the developmental program. And then if you need him to fill in, you can, you had that option with him too. So we'll see where it goes. Hey, at the end of the day, if you can put Zach Edey and Yuki Kawamura on the same roster, it's sort of hard not to do so, right?
It's great. And it turns out the clique, the celebratory legion for Yuki Kawamura, is not a very exclusive club because there's an awful lot of people in the club,
Yes.
as I have figured out, and I think the rest of Memphis has figured out. But it's also, again, it's going to be so great when there's 4 minutes left in the game and the Grizzlies are up by 30 points or they're down by 30 points and Yuki checks in and the crowd still has something to go crazy about. That's what's going to be awesome. It's like having the walk-on on the end of the bench who never gets in the game and like he comes in and takes a three and everybody goes nuts. Like it's the NBA version of that. And that's awesome. I love that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
Um, moving on, you wrote some more about your 10 takeaways from the preseason. I saw number 4 on your list, I believe, somewhere 4 or 5 was Jalen Wells. I think he's played pretty well. Um,
He's played great, and
yeah,
it's not just that he's hit a bunch of threes because, like I said earlier, in a short sample, short window, any viable shooter can get hot and hit a bunch of threes. It is that he's hit a bunch of threes. He's hit different kinds of threes. They're not all just pure catch and shoot. Like he's done some like step into stuff, some sidestep kind of stuff. He hit 2 clutch threes. Like 2 of those threes were like in the last minute of close games. But he's done other stuff too. He's shown the ability to get into the lane and make a play. I think he's passed the ball pretty well, not as a playmaker, but like as a cog in the system. He's been alert in his passing. I still wondered a little bit about the defense and the athleticism generally, but he is 6'7". I think he's played great. I don't think playing great in the preseason is a guarantee of anything, but in terms of performance, I do think it's a guarantee of earning more opportunity. And I think, especially given the injuries, I think he's going to be in the rotation on Wednesday night. I hope he hits a bunch of shots and stays there. We'll find out.
I would guess he'll be in the rotation too. I think the answer to this is clear because one player's on the main roster and the other's not. But is Jay Huff or Jalen Wells playing well in the preseason more significant? I'm, I think it's pretty obviously Wells, but I think
Yeah,
Jay Huff, from a depth perspective, might have the opportunity to mean more.
I think it's Wells. I think the Jay Huff thing is a revelation to Grizzlies fans who had previously never watched Jay Huff. Because why would you watch Jay Huff? He hasn't played NBA basketball. Unless you're really tuned into summer league, G League stuff, you haven't watched. But like he's been doing this, and so I think the Grizzlies as an organization, they're not surprised that Jay Huff has played well in preseason games. And so the question is like, what's he going to do? How much is he going to help you in regular season? So I think the J Hub thing has been a nice introduction for Grizzlies fans. I don't think it's changed anything about the conception of him as a player for beyond that. But the Jalen Wells thing is different because like he is not. I mean, he wasn't that great in summer league. He had a couple. He had one big shot. He had like maybe 1 or 2 good games, but he was kind of up and down in summer league. He's played way better in this preseason consistently than he did in summer league, and he's a rookie.
Yeah. Well, what I like is he's not just sitting back there bombing threes. Like he's capable of doing that, but he's doing more than that. And he's
Yeah,
shooting and he's a second round pick. And like second round picks don't come in bombing like this. We were saying the exact opposite about Jake LaRavia at this stage of
one
his
one
career.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy
So
who was like struggling to get stuff off and seemed to like not really assert himself. And I think that has changed with Jake LaRavia. Now the shooting has not necessarily changed, but the assertiveness has changed. But Jalen Wells is assertive from the jump. Yeah.
I go back to when I was in Utah. Speaking of Utah, where I'm about to go, I was in Utah the day after Jalen Wells hit the game winner in the summer league game, and I was sitting with Jalen Wells' dad in the stands, and we had like a lot. We watched half the game together, and we were just talking about Jalen and you know like because I was just curious how a guy like that ends up playing in Division two, versus
Right.
being a because he was also like in Sacramento, I think it was Sacramento or Fresno. He was like the high school player of the year, and he didn't end up on D1 at a D1 program. And I was like, how the heck does this happen?
Right.
And it was because of COVID. Everybody got granted an extra year, and so all the programs that were recruiting him basically said, I think we're going to stick with our super seniors now that can come back and play. And it was like Baylor and St. Mary's and a couple others. And so Jalen Wells was like, well, screw it. I guess I'm going to go play. He could have done another year or gone to like a prep school or something, but he's like, I'm going to go play in college against bigger guys. So he went to D2 and played extremely well and then moved on to Washington State and played extremely well again. But the one thing that his dad, who used to coach him, kept hammering home to me was like, my number one thing for Jalen is I keep telling him like he's got to imagine himself there. Like he's about to take the court with Ja Morant and Desmond Bain, and he needs to feel like he belongs with Ja Morant and Desmond Bain. Like he can't be, the little rookie that's like gets in there and He's taken that to heart very clearly. And I keep coming back to that moment
Yeah.
when his dad was telling me about that because he is not afraid to be out there with some of the best players. It's been very impressive. I've been very impressed by him. Um, so that's definitely been one of the preseason storylines. Anything else from your piece that you'd want to point out? Anything else that
I,
stood out?
I, I, I don't even remember anymore
You wrote
what
about
all I
everybody
wrote.
else on the roster. You wrote about Jay Huff. Oh, you wrote about a little bit about the new offense and the pace. That's going to be interesting because I think that this is going to be still a work in progress even after we get through like the first week of the season.
Yeah,
That's what I'm discovering.
I don't know whether I'll do this column again, but in the past, sort of along the like idea, I did the 10 takes from preseason. In a lot of past seasons, I've waited 10 games in and done like a 10 takes after 10 games. And I don't wait 10 games to write anything about the team, but I wait 10 games to take a step back and say, okay, what does this look like? And so I'll be interested to reevaluate that, 10 games in. In terms from a preseason standpoint, I think they led the preseason in assist rate. They were also, if not first, pretty high up at the turnover rate. So there was a
Yes.
lot of assisting and a lot of turnovers happening. They were hitting the offensive boards pretty hard. The offensive rebound rate was high. The shooting was okay. It all added up to kind of a middling performance, but it's 5 preseason games and like without any Jaron and not much Ja, and so like whatever. The pay stuff is just always funny to me because like it's just every year. It's just I mean Mike Fratello used to talk about how they were going to run, and that team did not run. And the Grizzlies do run. Like that's what they've run basically pretty much, other than last season, which is a throwaway. They've been a fast-paced team every year that John Morant and Taylor Jenkins have been here, and so like that's not they're going to be fast. But it's funny to see all the focus on how fast they're playing, and then to look up, and their pace number this preseason is actually slower than their pace number last preseason. So we'll see. I know they're going to be a fast paced team. My question is how effective they're going to be at it, and what I wonder about. And I don't say this as a rhetorical statement or a leading question. I honestly don't know the answer. The fact that they are less athletic than they were, I wonder how that's going to impact their effectiveness in transition. It may be that you get like a lot of Luke Kennard and Jalen Wells threes in transition, and you're better than ever. Right? That could be, or Santi Aldama pops or whatever, but they're not quite as athletic as they were. And I wonder how that's going to look in terms of trying to play fast.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. And I'm with you. Like I do want to have the luxury of waiting to evaluate, but I do think that this is like Edie and this new offense are 1A and 1B in terms of what I will walk away from the preseason remembering, you know? Like those
I,
two are like the number 1 and 2 storylines very clearly to me.
I will say I just rattled up certain numbers in terms of the team performance in preseason. But like from watching it, like I like the back cuts. Like just in terms of from watching basketball, I enjoy watching the cutting. I like that they've gotten a lot of layups off those back cuts. I like that there is more movement when they're running that offense. Now, sometimes they go away from it. Sometimes they run pick and roll. They've run
Mm-hmm.
post ups for Zach Edey, and so I mean you're going to get into this more. We'll be exploring it over the season. Even with this new system, it's not like it's going to be a system that is every second of every game they're running the system. It's going to be a blend. But when they've run more of the pure system, I actually enjoy it. Whether it's effective or not, it's a separate question. But I like the cuts and the passing and all that. To me, that's pretty good looking basketball.
Yeah, I think that not to give too much away because I'm writing in detail. I think it's what the Grizzlies did this offseason is really fascinating from several different standpoints, not just like the basketball coaching standpoint, but just I think there are so many connections within these new hires that people don't even necessarily recognize. And it was very clearly a risk to go out and make this hire and bring in kind of a unproven at the NBA level system in this way. And I think there have been questions about how much are they going to use this. Like, over the summer, we were talking about this crazy LaRoche offense that they had used in D3 and then they brought in a Salo and now he's the head of the offense. It's like, and I think what we're going to come to find out is that all of these ideologies, they're similar, but they're not exactly the same. And now they're going to try to blend all of them into one thing and kind of operate in a way that maybe around the NBA currently they don't a lot of teams typically do not operate. And so um, it's going to be really interesting to see if it works. And I think you're going to get some of that. And then you're also going to get Ja Morant pick and roll and Zach Edey post ups
Right,
because
right.
you almost have to. It doesn't necessarily make sense to not do that. I did ask Taylor Jenkins today, and I'm sure this will be included in the piece, but about using unique players like Edey and Ja in a system like this. And he very quickly pointed out, like, yeah, they have really unique talents, but I think they have more talents than maybe people recognize. And like Ja off the ball is pretty good. And so the idea of having Ja off the ball as an athlete that can get to the rim might really help us.
Oh,
Versus throwing the same thing at the defense over and over and over again, where they have a chance to prepare for it. You know what I
I
mean?
mean, some of these like John Conchar and like Jake LaRavia baseline cuts we've seen in this offense, and a lot of these Jake LaRavia baseline cuts, from my memory, like have not resulted in baskets. They've resulted in contested missed shots. Some of those same cuts, imagine John Morant like going up and like slamming it down on some of those, right? And so John Morant is dynamic off the ball as a cutter in a way that there are very few players who are as good on the ball as Morant is, who are also as dynamic as a cutter and finisher off the ball. The shooting's the other question. Like that's the piece that, we talked about that earlier in the pod, and we'll see if that comes around. But he's dynamic as a cutter in a way that, like, Trae Young's not. I mean, Luka Doncic is not. Most guys who are like dominant, like, lead guard types can't get off the ball and be a finisher like John Morant can.
How we feeling about the season opener on Monday or on Wednesday? Excuse me.
What did Calipari used to say? Danger game, right?
Danger
I
game.
danger game. I don't know. I mean, I would to go in. Utah is the kind of team, or normally you would say you want that, right? But like they haven't started tanking yet, probably. I think they may wait a couple weeks, so you're probably going to get the best of Utah. You're going to be in their building. That's not an easy place to play in terms of in terms of a trip and the altitude and everything. And your first game with the new offense. You're playing without Jaren and three of your bench players, and you haven't built a lot of reps with the guys you're going to throw out there. And so it's a little bit, I mean, to the degree that one loss doesn't mean that much, but it's a little bit of a dangerous game.
Yeah, as Nick Saban would say, they got to avoid the rat poison on this one.
Yeah.
Can't be thinking you're going to win this one going in there because it's so early. No one's truly tanking yet. Although I think Utah's going to tank at some point.
Right, right.
And I mean, the Utah fans,
Let's put it
they
this
have
way.
interesting history with, especially even Ja. But like that
Yeah.
building's going to be loud. That's for sure on that one.
Whoever they trade at the deadline, like they're going to be there on opening night. Colin Sexton may be a Laker come March, but he's going to be with the Utah Jazz this week. Jordan Clarkson, might be coming off the bench for, I don't know, the Cleveland Cavaliers or something come March. But he's going to be with the Utah Jazz. And so marketing may be shut down late in the season. It's when they're tanking, but he'll be playing this week. And so it's going to be the version of the Jazz that plays on Wednesday night is going to be a more talented version of the Jazz than the average team they put on the floor this season.
I think if you're the Grizzlies and you are getting Jaren back on Saturday against Orlando and you're 1-1, you're pretty happy. Especially if you're playing without him in the first two. You could be 2-0 for sure, and that's the goal. But 1-1, I feel like you're coming back feeling okay. 0-2, people are already, the sky's going to be
Yeah,
falling.
no, yes, people are going to be antsy if they're 0-2 coming into the home opener. That's for sure.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to going out there. I'm looking forward to the real thing getting started. Chris, do you have anything you are working on that you want to let people know?
I'm feeling. I've written so much already. I did my NBA preview on Friday, which was similar to some degree what stuff we talked about in the pod last week, but in some ways different. And I did the big 10 takeaways from preseason. So I got two big pieces up from Friday and Monday. People can check out if they haven't. And like I said, I'm fiddling around. I may do like more of a shorter, broader, the season is beginning kind of column tomorrow. We'll see where I get with that.
As I mentioned, if you're interested in this Grizzlies overhaul of ideology, particularly offensively, I have a pretty in-depth piece on the way. I'm hoping it'll be ready for the morning of the season opener. So make sure you are checking out the Daily Memphians website for that one. And if you want to go read about Yuki, like everybody else, it seems, go over to the Daily Memphian and read that one as well. Make sure you're checking out all the other podcasts. Chris, I didn't tell you this. I was on the food podcast last week, giving out takes.
I have not caught up with that. What did you recommend?
Spicy takes.
Give us a bonus recommendation here.
I was talking about homemade meals, artichokes with Italian breadcrumbs stuffed that my wife makes. I was talking about lemony couscous soup. I was talking about the crab claws at Echo, the appetizer, which is probably like one of my absolute favorite dishes in Memphis. And I was talking about South Haven and Collierville Mexican restaurants. So I got all my takes. All my takes. I also hosted the Tigers podcast as well. So
all right,
everywhere. I've been acting like you on the radio every day and then podding at the Daily Memphian all over the place. So
all right,
go check out all that stuff. Make sure you go read Chris and I over at the website. But that'll do it for us. We'll be back to break down the Grizzlies' first week of the season next week. But for Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.